I never thought a simple hiking group would end up flipping my entire weekend and my life upside down. Honestly, I just joined because I wanted to get out of the city for a bit, clear my head, maybe meet some new people who weren't just staring at their phones every 2 seconds. Instead, I found myself way off the beaten path, both literally and figuratively, because of one guy who wasn't exactly what I expected. So here's how it all started. I'm Mark, 28, your average software guy with way too many hours logged in front of a screen and zero real outdoor skills. I figured joining a local hiking group, one I found through some Facebook event, would force me to unplug and maybe get some fresh air. The group was advertised as, quote, casual hikers welcoming all experience levels, which sounded perfect for me. I wasn't out to break any speed records or summit mountains. I just wanted to walk, talk, and maybe see some greenery that wasn't in a park surrounded by traffic. I showed up that Saturday morning at the trailhead, a little nervous but mostly excited. There were maybe a dozen people milling about, lacing up boots, stretching, chatting. Then I noticed him. Tall, a bit scruffy, but in a good way, wearing this faded Patagonia jacket that looked like it had seen 1,000 trails. His hair was tousled and sun-bleached at the tips, and there was this easy confidence in the way he leaned against a tree, casually sipping from a water bottle. His name was Alex. I don't know what it was, but something about Alex immediately made me want to talk to him. Maybe it was the way he smiled when someone cracked a joke, or how his eyes scanned the group with genuine interest instead of boredom. When he caught me staring, he gave a little nod and said, "First time with the group?" I nodded, feeling my face heat up. "Yeah, hoping to survive." He laughed. A warm, easy sound that didn't feel forced. "You'll do fine. Just follow the leader and don't get lost." I smiled back, but little did I know. "Don't get lost" was going to be more like a warning than advice. We started the hike with the usual small talk. Jobs, where we're from, favorite spots to eat nearby. Alex and I seemed to click right away. He wasn't pushy about anything, but had this quiet way of making you feel like you mattered. As we moved deeper into the woods, the conversation drifted from surface stuff to more personal things. I found myself opening up about how I'd always been kind of an indoorsy guy, how I was trying to change that, step outside my comfort zone. Alex shared stories about backpacking trips, the kind of wild places he'd been to, and I was intrigued, but also a little intimidated. Then came the fork in the trail, the moment where everything shifted. Our leader pointed us in the direction of a well-marked path that was supposed to loop us back in about 2 hours. But Alex, with that same half smile, said something like, "Hey, there's a shortcut I know. It's not on the map, but it's a way to see a hidden waterfall. It's a bit rougher terrain, but trust me, it's worth it." At first, I hesitated. I barely knew the guy. And here he was, suggesting we ditch the group and take a path that nobody else was on. But there was something in his voice, a blend of adventure and mischief, that made me say yes before I even really thought about it. And just like that, Alex took me off the trail. We slipped away from the group just as they started chatting about taking a break up ahead. Honestly, I half expected some resistance, like maybe someone would call us back or give us a skeptical look. But Alex just glanced over his shoulder with that easy grin and said, "You're gonna love this." I'm not gonna lie, part of me was a little nervous. Not just because we were veering off the planned path, but because I didn't really know Alex, beyond a few minutes of small talk. Yet, there was something about the way he carried himself, like he belonged in these woods, that made me trust him, or at least want to trust him. The trail he led us on was definitely rougher. The smooth dirt path gave way to roots and rocks, and at one point we had to carefully hop over a small creek. I stumbled more than once, but he was patient, slowing down to match my pace without making me feel like I was holding him back. Honestly, that was one of the first times in a long while I felt like someone was paying attention to me in the moment. Not to my job title or my Instagram likes, just me, trying to keep up on a messy trail. After about 20 minutes of weaving through the trees and scrambling over rocks, the sound of rushing water grew louder. Alex led me toward the noise until suddenly we broke through the thick brush, and there it was. A waterfall, tucked away like some secret treasure. It wasn't huge or anything, but the way the water spilled over the mossy rocks into a clear pool below felt like a scene stolen from a nature documentary. We both just stood there for a second, catching our breath and soaking it in. The sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled light on the wet stones, and the air was cool and fresh, nothing like the city smog I'd been breathing all week. Alex kicked off his boots without hesitation and stepped into the pool, water swirling around his ankles. "Best kept secret around here," he said, smirking. Then, without waiting, he turned to me. "So, what do you think? Worth getting a little lost for?" I laughed, feeling that buzz of adrenaline and surprise that comes from doing something spontaneous. "Yeah, definitely." "I'm glad you took me off the trail." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a second, the easygoing guy with the mischievous smile seemed almost nervous. It was subtle, but I noticed. Maybe it was just my imagination. We spent the next half hour there, just hanging out, talking about everything and nothing. I told him about my awkward attempts at hiking before, how most of my weekends were Netflix binges. He shared why he loved the outdoors, how it was the one place where his thoughts felt clear and his worries less heavy. At some point, he reached out and grabbed a handful of water from the pool, flicking it toward me. I tried to dodge, but ended up with a splash right on my shirt. He laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made you want to laugh too, even if you just got drenched. I don't know how or when it happened, but standing there in that hidden corner of the woods, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and pine, I started to feel something I hadn't in a while. A connection. Not just the usual getting to know someone thing, but a spark, something warmer and more electric. Eventually, we realized we probably should head back before the group noticed we were gone. The sun was starting to dip lower, and the shadows stretched long between the trees. Alex slipped his boots back on and gave me a look that was half challenge, half invitation. "Race you back?" I wasn't about to lose, so we took off, scrambling over rocks and dodging branches. I was out of breath and laughing harder than I had in weeks by the time we popped back onto the main trail, blinking as our eyes adjusted to the fading sunlight. The group was still there, some people stretching, others checking their phones, none the wiser to our little detour. As we caught our breath, Alex turned to me, that same half smile tugging at his lips. "So, what do you say? Think you can handle a little more off-trail adventure next time?" I looked at him, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't quite explain, and said, "Yeah, I think I'd like that." But then, just as I was about to feel like maybe this was the start of something, I noticed the tiny scar just above his wrist, a faint line, like a secret he wasn't ready to share yet. And suddenly, I realized that Alex wasn't just a guy who took me off the trail. He was someone who might just take me on a path I never expected to travel. We rejoined the group just as the sun started setting behind the trees, casting a golden glow that made everything feel a little more magical. If you squinted hard enough, maybe even like something out of a movie. The others were just wrapping up their snack break, laughing about the usual hiking group cliches. The guy who always disappears to check the map, the one who brings way too much gear for a casual day hike. Nobody seemed to notice we'd gone missing for a solid 40 minutes. I was half expecting someone to call us out, but nope. Apparently, we'd pulled off the perfect little disappearing act. Alex walked beside me, a quiet kind of satisfaction in his stride. I was still buzzing from the secret waterfall and that ridiculous water fight in the pool. It was the kind of moment you don't forget, you know? Like, not just because it was fun, but because it was unexpected and real. And because, somehow, I felt like I was seeing a side of Alex that the rest of the group didn't get to see. We caught up with everyone else just as the trail started to slope downward. The chatter picked up, and I could feel the group's energy shifting back into the usual friendly chaos. But I kept stealing glances at Alex. He was animated now, talking about the next hike they had planned, something about a sunrise summit. His eyes lit up talking about it, and I realized that this wasn't just a weekend hobby for him. It was a part of who he was. At one point, I asked, "So how long have you been doing this?" He shrugged like it was no big deal. "Since I was a kid, my parents dragged me out on family camping trips all the time. Guess I never really stopped." There was a softness in his voice when he said, "parents," like it brought up a memory he wasn't totally ready to unpack. I wanted to ask more, but didn't want to push. Instead, I just smiled. Seems like you know these woods better than anyone. He looked over and grinned. I know a few spots most people miss. Then, almost like an afterthought, he added, "You're pretty good for a rookie, by the way." I chuckled, feeling a mixture of pride and disbelief. Thanks. I'm just glad I didn't fall flat on my face when you dragged me off the main path. Alex laughed again, that easy laugh that was somehow making my chest tighten. Hey, sometimes the best stories come from getting a little lost. We walked the last stretch back in silence for a bit, the kind of comfortable quiet that happens when you don't have to fill the space with words. When we finally reached the parking lot, the group started gathering their stuff and saying their goodbyes. I realized I didn't want the day to end, not just because the hike was fun, but because being with Alex felt different. Like maybe this was the start of something I hadn't been expecting. Before anyone else could scatter, Alex turned to me with that same half smile, the one that made my heart do a weird little flip. Hey, if you're up for it, there's a coffee place just down the road. Quiet, no phones, just good espresso. I almost said yes before I even thought about it. Yeah, I'd like that. The coffee shop was small, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a wall covered in old vinyl records. We grabbed a corner table, the hum of soft jazz filling the background. For a while, we just talked about music, bad movies we secretly loved, the weird quirks of the city. It felt easy, like we'd known each other far longer than a few hours. At one point, he looked at me and said, "So, what made you really want to join the hiking group?" I mean, besides surviving. I laughed, shaking my head. Honestly, I was sick of feeling stuck, like I was running on a hamster wheel of work and routine and lonely weekends. I thought maybe getting outside, meeting new people would help shake that off. He nodded, eyes serious now. I get that. Sometimes you have to change the scenery to change the story. There was a pause, and then he leaned a little closer, lowering his voice. I'm glad you ended up saying yes to the off-trail adventure today. Not everyone does. I swallowed, suddenly aware of how close we were. Me too. Just when I thought the moment was settling into something quietly perfect, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down to see a message from the hiking group chat. Hey Mark, did you and Alex get separated from us? We've been worried. I looked up at Alex, who was watching me with a sort of amused expression, like he already knew what the message said. Well, I said, tucking my phone away, I guess we're officially the troublemakers now. He laughed, but there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of something unspoken, maybe a hint that this was just the beginning of the stories we'd make together. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where the next trail would take us. The coffee shop's cozy atmosphere started to fade for me as that message sat heavy in my pocket. I glanced at Alex, trying to read his expression. He shrugged, that same half-grin playing on his lips, like he was daring me to make a choice. Well, looks like we're officially those guys. I laughed nervously, the kind of laugh that doesn't quite reach your eyes. Yeah, we kinda owe everyone an explanation. Alex leaned back and sipped his espresso, eyes scanning the room briefly before settling back on me. Honestly, I don't usually break off from the group like that, but something about today just felt different. I forgot to ask what he meant until now, but I was curious. Different how? He shrugged, but his voice softened. Maybe I've been stuck in my own routine. You know, always the same hikes, the same people. It's easy to get comfortable, but that comfort can turn into a cage. There it was, the scar I'd noticed earlier, the subtle weight behind his words. I wanted to ask more, but I also didn't want to push too hard, especially on a first date. So I nodded and said, I get that. I'm definitely trying to get out of my own cage. He smiled, and for a moment, the room shrank to just the two of us. So what now? Admit we broke all the hiking rules and hope they forgive us? Maybe, I said, feeling a bit braver. Or maybe we show up next time and tell them about the secret waterfall. Alex's eyes sparkled with mischief. You're full of ideas, Mark. I like that. We lingered over our coffee longer than either of us planned, the conversation flowing easily from lighthearted jokes to deeper stories. He talked about his job. He was a photographer, which explained his rugged look and the way he saw beauty in the smallest details. I told him about my coding job and how it sometimes felt like I was just typing my life away. Before we knew it, the sun was dipping behind the city skyline, and the coffee shop was starting to close up. Outside, the air was cooling, the kind of crisp that hinted at autumn sneaking in. "Walk you back to your car?" Alex offered, his tone casual, but with an undercurrent of something warmer. I nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." As we stepped out, the sounds of the city felt distant, like the woods had followed us in spirit. We walked side by side, the streetlights flickering on one by one. The brief silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like we were both savoring the moment. At my car, I hesitated, not wanting the evening to end. "Thanks for today, for everything." Alex smiled softly. "No, thank you. You trusted me to take you off the path. That's not something I forget." I laughed, a little embarrassed. "I guess I'm glad I took the risk." He looked at me then, eyes searching, and for a second, it felt like he was trying to decide something. Then, quietly, he said, "Hey, if you're free next weekend, there's a night hike up at Blue Ridge. It's one of my favorites. No group, just us." My heart skipped. "I'm free." And just like that, a new adventure was on the horizon. Driving home later that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that today was the start of something I never saw coming. A detour from my usual path that might just lead somewhere amazing. The city lights blurred past, but my mind was still tangled in the woods, the waterfall, and the guy who took me off the trail and into something new. The week crawled by in a way that only happens when you're counting down to something you're not quite sure about, but can't stop thinking about anyway. I found myself checking my phone, going over the messages Alex and I had exchanged, and somehow those short texts felt like little threads pulling me closer to him. When Saturday finally rolled around, I woke up with a mix of excitement and nerves I hadn't felt in years. A night hike? That was a new one for me. I mean, I'd never even done a daytime hike without worrying I'd trip over my own feet, let alone in the dark. But there was something about Alex's invitation that made me want to throw caution, and maybe some common sense, to the wind. I met him near the base of Blue Ridge, just as the sun was dipping low, casting the sky in streaks of pink and orange. He was already there, leaning casually against his beat-up Jeep, his camera bag slung over one shoulder, and that same easy grin lighting up his face when he saw me. "Ready for this?" he asked, eyes twinkling. I smiled back, trying to hide the butterflies. "As ready as I'll ever be." The trail was different from the one we'd first explored together, wider, more familiar. But as the sun set and the shadows grew longer, it took on a whole new personality. Soon we were enveloped in darkness, relying on the weak glow of our headlamps to guide the way. The night sounds, rustling leaves, distant birds, the occasional snap of a twig, felt more alive than anything I'd experienced in the city. As we walked, Alex kept talking, pointing out constellations that I never knew existed, explaining how the forest changed at night, how quiet it really was once you tuned out your own footsteps. I was soaking it all in, feeling a strange kind of peace I hadn't realized I was missing. At one point, a shooting star streaked across the sky, and Alex stopped walking, standing still in the silence. "Make a wish," he said softly. I did, though I didn't tell him what it was. We reached the summit just as the moon rose high, casting a silver glow over the city lights below. It looked breathtaking. From up here, the chaos of urban life seemed small and manageable, a world apart from the quiet of the mountain. We sat side by side on a smooth rock, the cool night air wrapping around us like a blanket. Alex pulled out a thermos from his backpack, offering me a sip of hot tea. I took it gratefully, the warmth spreading through me and easing the tension I'd been holding all day. "You ever done anything like this before?" he asked, voice low. I shook my head. "Nope. Honestly, I'm kind of amazed I didn't fall off the mountain." He laughed, and I felt my heart skip. "You're braver than you think." There was a pause, that charged kind of silence where you both know something's about to change, but you don't quite know how. Then Alex looked over, eyes searching mine. "Mark, I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like there's something here, something real." My breath caught. "Yeah, I feel that too." He reached out, fingers brushing against mine, with a gentle hesitation that sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't pull away. Instead, I closed the gap, letting our hands intertwine under the moonlight. For a moment, the world was just us. The two guys who had somehow found each other by getting lost in the woods. When we finally stood to head back, the weight of the night settled around us like a promise. We walked slower on the descent, savoring the quiet, the connection, and whatever this was that was starting to grow between us. By the time we reached the bottom, my legs were tired, but my heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. Alex looked over at me, a soft smile playing on his lips. "So, same time next weekend?" I grinned, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the tea. "Definitely." Driving home, I couldn't stop replaying the night in my head. The way his hand felt in mine, the way the stars had seemed to wink just for us, the way I realized maybe sometimes getting off the trail is exactly what you need to find your way. The days after that night hike felt different, like the world had shifted just slightly on its axis, and I was seeing everything through this new lens. I caught myself grinning at random moments, replaying how Alex's fingers felt against mine, how the city lights looked from that summit, and how easy it was to just be with him. But, of course, life doesn't pause for magic moments. Work piled up, emails kept arriving like a relentless tide, and somehow, in the middle of all that, I realized I was getting nervous about the next time I'd see him. It wasn't just the usual butterflies anymore. There was this weight, like I was finally letting myself care about someone in a way I hadn't in a long time. And that scared me. I met Alex again the following weekend, just like we said we would. This time, the plan was a sunrise hike at a nearby state park called Eagles Point. I showed up early, bundled up against the chill of dawn, and saw him already there, nervously adjusting his camera gear. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. He looked up and smiled, but there was a flicker of something, maybe nerves, in his eyes. "Morning, Mark. Ready for the early wake-up call?" I laughed. "Honestly, no. But I'm here." We started the hike in the dark again, headlamps bobbing through the trees, but this time there was a quiet energy between us. Maybe it was the shared secret of those early hours, or the way the world felt like ours alone before the sun showed up. About halfway up, Alex stopped and pointed. "Look!" We both watched as the horizon slowly brightened, the pinks and oranges bleeding into the night sky. It was stunning, like the whole world was waking up with us. We didn't say much, just stood there side by side, the silence filled with the sound of birds beginning their morning songs. After a few minutes, Alex broke the quiet. "Can I tell you something?" I nodded, heart already pounding. He took a deep breath. "That scar on my wrist, you noticed it, right?" I felt my throat tighten. "Yeah, I did." He glanced down at his wrist, tracing the faint line with a finger. "It's a long story, not the kind I usually share right away. But since you asked about my parents last time, I guess it's time." I gave him a gentle squeeze on the arm, silently encouraging him to go on. Alex's voice dropped, quieter now. "It's from when I was younger. My family wasn't easy. There was a lot of tension, a lot of things we didn't talk about. That scar's from a moment when things got out of control." He looked back at me, eyes searching, vulnerable. I guess I've spent a lot of time running from that part of my past. But being out here with you, it's like I'm starting to face it instead of hiding. I swallowed hard, feeling honored he was sharing this with me. "Thank you for trusting me." He gave a small smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "You make it easier." We continued the hike, but the mood had shifted. Deeper now, more real. When we reached the summit, the sun was fully up, casting light over the valley below. We sat on a fallen log, drinking in the view and the quiet comfort of each other's company. Without thinking, I reached out and took his hand again. This time, he didn't hesitate. Instead, he laced his fingers through mine, and it felt like the first time I'd ever really held on to something that mattered. On the way down, we talked more about fears, regrets, hopes. The kind of conversation that sneaks up on you, catching you off guard because it's honest and raw and exactly what you didn't know you needed. By the time we got back to the parking lot, the group was already gathering for their usual weekend hike. We rejoined them, but I noticed the difference in myself. I wasn't just a guy tagging along anymore. I was someone who'd found a reason to keep coming back, a reason to explore not just the trails, but the possibilities beyond them. Alex caught my eye as we said our goodbyes, a silent promise passing between us. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that sometimes the best detours aren't the ones on the map. They're the ones that lead you to someone who helps you find your way. After that sunrise hike, things between Alex and me settled into a rhythm that felt natural, not forced or rushed, just the way a growing connection usually does when you let it breathe. We kept exploring trails together, sometimes with the group, sometimes just the two of us, wandering off the beaten path in more ways than one. Each hike, each conversation pulled us closer, the kind of closeness that doesn't need grand declarations but grows quietly through shared moments. One afternoon, a few weeks later, we found ourselves at a small lookout point, the city sprawling below us, hazy in the late summer heat. We sat side by side on a fallen log, the silence comfortable, the kind that only happens when words aren't necessary. Alex nudged me gently, a smile tugging at his lips. He said, "I never thought I'd find someone who'd actually want to get lost with me." I laughed, nudging him back. "Well, if getting lost means finding you, I'm all in." He looked over, eyes soft. Me too. It wasn't a big dramatic moment, no fireworks or sweeping confessions, but it was real. Honest. Something steady that made sense after all the detours and missteps. Later, as the sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over the trees, I realized that joining that hiking group was the best decision I'd made in a long time. Not because of the group itself, but because it led me to Alex. He'd taken me off the trail and, in doing so, helped me find a path I didn't know I was searching for. Sometimes life doesn't go as planned, and that's okay. Sometimes you have to get a little lost to find something that feels like home. And for me, that something was standing right beside me, hand in hand, ready for whatever trail came next.